Okay, so we are now live on YouTube. So I will go ahead with introductions. Anna, you can hear me and see me okay, right?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. As I was just saying a few seconds ago, we're going to go ahead and ask everybody to unmute and feel free to go ahead and participate and ask questions and comment throughout the today's workshop. My name is Barnes Monteith, and I'm from Tumble Home Books. We're a publisher that focuses primarily on STEM education books. And our youngest author ever, and one of our new authors, is Anna Du, and she's going to be talking to you all today. In my other role as a very long-standing, probably the longest standing chair of the Mass State Science and Engineering Fair for many years now. I've had the pleasure of introducing Anna on stage as a winner because at the moment she is the top-rated student in Massachusetts. She has won our top award, which we call the Genzyme Award, which is an award that where funding is provided to her school, to her teacher, and she gets a fellowship and a scholarship as part of this award. But in addition, for the past few years, I've also had the pleasure of introducing Anna as a top winner at the Massachusetts Middle School Fair and as a top winner at or participant and top winner at other national fairs, including being a finalist at the International Science and Engineering Fair, at the JSHS Symposium, being named a top 10 young scientist in the country by Discovery and 3M through their competition. Participating in Broadcom. She's sort of a celebrity in the sense that she's had articles written about her in Smithsonian. She's been on Fox 25 News. She recently was on the Disney Channel. She had a 10-episode TV show on DirecTV called Operation Awesome, which re-aired twice. So I think they just finished that one up. So if you want to check that out, you could see Anna as a star of her own TV show. And again, that's called Operation Awesome. And lots and lots of other things. So I'm sure I'm missing a whole lot of her accolades, but you can find the rest through links on our website and at her website and YouTube channel, which I'm sure she will be sharing with you throughout her talk. And if there's anything I'm missing, Anna, you can fill them in about all the awesome stuff that you've been doing. So we're very proud to have Anna do her own Tumbleocity today. And Tumbleocity is our ongoing series of workshops. For those of you who are new today, I encourage you to regularly visit the front of our website. We usually have a link to be able to sign up to all of our Tumbleocity courses, which we host just about every month or every other month. And we welcome you all to come back. So with that, I just want to say thanks, Anna, for being here today.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Barnes. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Okay, so I'm just going to get started. So I'm really excited to be sharing a little bit about my story and my journey through tackling the big problem of microplastic pollution, and a little bit about how I've been using my science fair project in order to do that. So first, to get started, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the big problem of plastic pollution. And I'm going to start that off with a poll that should launch right now. Can everybody see this poll? So it's basically asking, where do most of the plastics end up? And there's a few different options here. So the plastics, I'll give you about like maybe 30 seconds to answer the poll. So the plastics could end up in the beaches, or maybe they might be in the air or on mountains. They might be in landfills or even in outer space. might be on the ocean floor or in rivers and ponds. So I kind of just want to see where you guys think most of the plastics will be ending up. Okay, it seems like a few more responses are trickling in. Okay. Okay, it seems like most of us have answered already. So I'm going to end this poll and share the results. So a lot of people said on the bottom of the ocean floor, and if you said that, you'd be right. Although on the beach is a very good guess as well. So a lot of these plastics end up on the ocean floor because does anybody know what surface area of the Earth the ocean covers? And you can feel free to just shout it out if you know. It covers about 70% of the surface area of the Earth. So that's really quite a big amount, which is why a lot of the times when you just throw away plastics randomly, it'll mostly end up in the ocean. And so the primary purpose of my project was to find where those microplastics were located. So let me go. Okay, so my next question is, do you know how many types of plastics there are? And if you know a little bit about recycling, this will probably be a very easy question for you. But I'm just going to launch the poll for that. Okay. So I'll let some results trickle in. I'll give you guys a hint though. If you pick up something like, over here I have this tape dispenser. You can see that there's this triangle over here, which has a little number inside of it. I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but on a lot of disposable water bottles or on plastic containers, on the bottom of those, you can see a number on it, and that number represents the type of plastic that it is. And so let's see. Okay, I think a lot of people have answered, so I'm going to end the poll now. So most of you guys are right. Some of you guys said 10 or 100, and I can definitely see that. There are a lot of types of plastics, but what's primarily recognized by recycling centers is that there's 7 types of plastics, and they're mostly sorted by how easily recyclable they are. So on the very top, you have PETE, and that's from things like disposable water bottles. And actually, what happens a lot is they get shredded and they turn into microfibers that you can find on your clothing. And if you maybe look at the tags on the back of your shirt or your sweater, you might be able to see that it's made out of some percentage of polyethylene terephthalate. That's number 1. And then number 2, this is actually my favorite type of plastic. And that's because number 2, HDPE, has a very low melting temperature. And so that means that there's really a lot that you can do with it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but I just sort of wanted to share how awesome that type of plastic is. Okay, so my next question is, guess how much plastic enters the ocean every single year? And so there's quite a lot of plastics that enter the ocean. Let me see. Let me just launch this. Okay. Can everybody see the poll? Okay, wonderful. So I'm not sure how many of you guys may have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So for those of you who have, you'll know that it's basically a very large plastic island in the middle of the ocean. And there's these plastic islands on every single ocean, but the one in the Pacific Ocean is the biggest. That's why it's called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And a lot of people say that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is twice the size of Texas. So as you can imagine, that's really a lot of plastic that must be entering the ocean. Okay, I see that almost everybody has answered now, so I'm going to share the results. A lot of you guys guessed 8 billion tons of plastics. The correct answer is 8 million tons. It's a lot of plastic that's entering the ocean every single year. Okay. But the thing is, when you think about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and those large garbage islands, you might think that, wow, this is a huge problem, right? But what I've learned with my project is that problems like that are actually only the tip of the iceberg. For the issue of plastic pollution, the biggest problem is actually very small, and it's microplastics. So just wanted to see how much you guys know about microplastics and try to guess how small these microplastics are. launch this. So do you think they might be like maybe the size of a Lego, or maybe a little bit bigger like a rubber ducky, or even a plastic bottle, or even smaller like one of those ironing beads? See. I'll give you guys a little bit of time to answer it. Okay, so most of you guys answered correctly. It is 5 millimeters or even smaller. So these microplastics are incredibly tiny. They're so small that you can barely see them with your naked eye. And a lot of times you even need a microscope just to be able to see where these microplastics are. So I guess a big problem with microplastics can really be described like this. So if you go to a parking lot and if you see a glass bottle over there, you might think that's very irresponsible of a person to just leave a bottle in the middle of the street. But also cleaning that problem up would be a pretty simple thing. You just pick that bottle up and then throw it away. But now if somebody took that bottle and they smashed it against the ground and it shattered into thousands or millions of tiny little pieces, suddenly this problem is a lot bigger, because not only are there so many little tiny pieces that it would be basically impossible to clean all of them up, they're also a lot more dangerous now, because those glass fragments could cut your hands or things like that. So this is similar to what happens to microplastics as well. The microplastics enter the ocean primarily through two different ways. The first way is already as microplastics. So for example, in cosmetics or in facial wipes, there might be some small microbeads, and whenever you wash your face and it ends up in one of the reservoirs, it can really easily end up in the ocean. And another way is if you think about those disposable grocery bags or disposable water bottles, when those enter the ocean, they can break down through either animals eating on them and chewing on them, or the waves breaking them apart. And that's another way that these plastics can become microplastics. So the big problem is that obviously these animals will start eating these microplastics. And there's a kind of a fancy term called bioaccumulation, which really explains how the problem sort of exacerbates throughout the food chain. And so when you start out with a tiny little fish and they maybe eat 1 or 2 pieces of microplastics, that's already a problem, obviously. But the toxins are still at a level where it's still okay for the fish to eat that much. But if you have a slightly larger fish that eats a number of these tinier fish, all of the microplastics that was inside those tiny fish's bodies will now have entered the slightly larger fish. And this just goes on until it even reaches our plates. So humans are really affected by microplastic pollution as well. And I guess the big question that I, as well as a lot of other people, have been asking throughout these past few years is, why can't we just stop using plastics? And obviously, we can do things like replacing disposable water bottles with reusable ones. We can start using metal straws or try to live a plastic-free life. But at the end of the day, our society at this point is really dependent on plastics. And I'm just looking around me right now and I can see so many things that are made out of plastics. Like, for example, this plastic mouse over here, you can see that the casing, the rubber, and the wire insulator, that's all made out of plastics. And I bet if you looked around your house, you can see a lot of things that are made out of plastics as well. And currently, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have a lot of plastic disposable masks. And we can't stop using these masks because they're there to protect us. But that does mean that there's a lot of pollution that's entering the ocean and affecting the wildlife. So we have to make sure that we're disposing of everything properly. What I've done to try and work on this major problem is I created this remotely operated vehicle to identify where microplastics are located on the ocean floor in 6th grade. So I started working on this because I already had this idea sort of noodling around in my mind. I was like thinking, I really want to do something to try to help save the ocean one day. But it wasn't until when I was in 6th grade, my teachers told us that all students were required to join a science fair, that I decided to really start working on this problem. Because when they said that we had to do a science fair, a lot of people were probably thinking of maybe like making a volcano. And what I was thinking was, well, doing something like a volcano is kind of interesting, I guess, but it's also really overdone. And I was thinking, why not do something bigger and better and cooler, which is why I started working on this project. And it sort of evolved throughout the past few years to become more like what it is today. And I've actually started using artificial intelligence in order to identify where these microplastics are located. And you can see on the bottom left over here, it's getting pretty accurate at identifying the microplastics. But there's so much cool things that you can do with artificial intelligence. And I'm going to show you guys a few examples. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay, can everybody see this? I'm going to run this program. I'm going to turn my video off first because it uses my camera. So this program takes a little bit to load, but it's really cool and I really like this program. Just gonna wait for it to load a little bit. I think it might be because Zoom's in the background, so my computer's a little busy. So I'm going to.
And maybe before you start it, you may want to make sure that your camera was off before that Python.
Yeah.
So everybody's learning some programming while Anna's doing this, right?
Okay, I'm redoing it. My camera's off. Okay. Okay, so you can see that now it's working finally. Thank you so much, computer. But you can see that it's identifying my face, like it's identifying the shape of my face. It can identify my eyes, and while I'm moving, it can follow me. And this doesn't just have to work for human faces as well. It can also work for faces that I've drawn. So I drew this in about maybe 1 minute. And you can see that if it doesn't get my face, maybe if I changed it in lighting a bit, or yeah, you can see on my book, it identifies my face over here. So it's really good at identifying human faces based on like their facial features. And another really cool program over here I'm going to run is this one. And this one identifies things based on the color. And right now it's looking at the green. So you can see on my book, there's a lot of green at the borders. And when I move my book around, the dot follows it. So that's another really cool thing that you can do with artificial intelligence. You can have it color track things. So what I've done with artificial intelligence for my project is I created this system, this simulation model to predict where microplastics are located. And I'm going to make this quality a little better, but it basically uses a bunch of environmental factors to predict where these microplastics will be located on the ocean floor in the future. And you can see how it's all sort of gathering in areas. So that's something that I've been doing. But there's a lot that you can do as well. So does anybody like have any ideas on like maybe some ways that they can, some things that they can do to help out, maybe not even with the problem of plastic pollution, maybe it's something with climate change or even just a local community problem. So I think some things that you can do that are really fun are you can attend a citizen science project. So what you can see over here, this is the International Pellet Watch. And what they do is they have volunteers from places all over the world, as you can see on this map over here, that collect plastic samples and they send them to a university in Japan. And what that university does is they look at the plastics for different types of toxins and chemicals and persistent organic pollutants or POPs. And they use that in order to create a map that sort of shows how toxic the plastics in a certain area are and how many plastics there are. Another thing that you can do is you can organize beach cleanups. And obviously, it'd be really cool if you were able to talk to your entire school and organize a whole thing about it. But it's also equally important if you just go out with your friends and family and clean up whatever trash you see along the way. It can really be something just as small as that. Another thing that you can do is you can attend a science fair. And I feel like when I attended a science fair, I learned so much just from working on my project. And I think that it's just a really great way in order to actually be able to make an impact and also to spread the word about whatever problem you're focusing on. But there's so many things that you can do from the comfort of your own home as well. You can do some DIY, do-it-yourself projects. And on the bottom left over here, you can see I'm holding up some Christmas ornaments that I made last year that are made from HDPE. So earlier I was talking about my favorite type of plastic, HDPE. Yeah, that's those bottle caps, and you can melt them in order to create a bunch of different things. And I actually have a video on my YouTube channel about how to create these Christmas ornaments that I'll link after this. But it's just really cool, and there's just so much that you can do with HDPE. But you can also make some small things like changing to reusable water bottles, or maybe whenever you're going grocery shopping, you can bring your own bags. And just small changes like that really add up when everybody starts to do it. And I think that just doing science fairs and working on this problem of plastic pollution has honestly changed my life in so many different ways. I've been able to go all around the world and meet people of all different walks of life, all to talk about plastic pollution and about ways that we can work on all sorts of different kinds of big world problems. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, and I was really excited to speak with you guys. And so if you have any questions, just feel free to unmute or leave it in the chat. And I'm going to link the YouTube channel over here. Okay. Oh, I see that there's a question in the chat already. How does the robot collect microplastics? So the ROV that I had, remotely operated vehicle, was designed to mostly scan the ocean floor for microplastics. Because if you think about it this way, let's say your room is really messy right now, and there's like clothes everywhere, there's food in random places. When you're looking at that, and like your parents really want you to clean your room, you might want to like look at the problem from your parents' perspectives and try to see which problems they would notice first. Like, what's the messiest places in your room that would make the most difference if you were to clean it up? Like, if you have a bunch of clothes on your bed, you might want to just fold all of those up really quickly, and already your room looks a lot cleaner. That's kind of the same with microplastics in the ocean. So because these microplastics are all accumulating in certain regions on the ocean floor, I was using my ROV to look for the places where the most microplastic would be accumulating, where they would have the most effect on the ecosystem and on the wildlife. Because as I said, the ocean, just on the surface, the ocean covers 70% of the surface area of the Earth. So obviously, if you're looking at the ocean floor, that's just a lot of area for people to just systematically go through and clean up, which is why I'm looking for these areas, these hot spots about where these microplastics are located. I see another question. How long did it take for me to write my book? It took me about a year to write my book, but this is sort of something that was already in the process of like building my ROV and like creating my science fair project and things like that. So it's kind of been a continuous journey, and I was able to just like sort of keep track of all my memories and things like that from places that I've been to, people that I've spoken with, and that's sort of how I created my book. Okay, I see that Maiden has asked, how did you discover and become interested in microplastics and pollution? That's a really good question. Thank you so much for that question. I became interested in microplastic pollution because initially, when I was first focusing on this problem, I was mostly thinking about plastic pollution in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, because that's usually what people think of when they think of the issue of plastic pollution. And it wasn't really until I did a lot of digging, I was reading a bunch of research papers and talking to some people who are experts in this field, and that was when I sort of noticed that microplastics actually were the real big problems here, and that was what I really needed to focus on. And so once I realized that, because these microplastics are just so small that people barely even think about them, that there's just there's such a big problem, that's really when I started working on that.
So Anna, if you'd like, I'm also getting some DMs from people. I don't know if you're, it looks like there's a couple. There's one from Cyan to everyone that says, how hard was it to build your robot? I'll get to the DMs after that.
Thank you for that question, Cyan. I'd say building my robot was, I wouldn't say it was very hard, but it was kind of more like a gradual building on the skills that I had. So initially, actually, when I first designed my robot, it didn't look anything like this background over here. It wasn't very cool. It was kind of more like a cube with a few motors attached to it that was sort of clunkily able to move around. But as I was working on that, as I was making improvements to that cube, it eventually morphed a bit, and I was able to learn more from my mistakes. Like, for example, once when I was testing my ROV out, when it was still somewhat in the early stages, I brought it out to the beach. I made a very rookie mistake of not checking the weather reports first, and it was raining a lot that day. And when I first had my controller, it was made out of cardboard. So as you can imagine, when it started raining a lot, that was kind of disastrous. Luckily, I was able to learn from my mistakes, and I made a better control box that was a lot sturdier, definitely waterproof. And I also learned my lesson of always checking the weather report. So it was kind of like building on all these different lessons that I learned, these random little things that happened. And so I wouldn't say it was really very hard to build my robot, but I think that if I were to, with the knowledge that I had when I first began working on this, I don't think I would have been able to create something like that. Someone asked, what tips do you have for kids who want to enter a science fair? Honestly, I'd say, first of all, just no matter what you think about the project that you have right now, honestly, just go for it. And I'd say for tips, maybe I think like maybe reaching out to people who are experts in their field. For example, when I first started working on my project, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know a lot about the issue of plastic pollution. So I was able to search up some people who had written a few articles on it. I reached out to them. And I wasn't really expecting anything, but to my surprise, I actually found that a lot of people really sent emails back. They sent advice and things like that. And so I'd say just reach out to anybody, and it doesn't matter if they reply or not, because they might not, but there's always the chance that they might, and you don't want to miss out about that. Okay, I see Barnes just, was that a message from the DMs? Okay, so I think someone asked, what is your Deep Plastic Initiative? So the Deep Plastics Initiative is basically an organization that I've created in order to basically spread the word about microplastic pollution. So there's a lot of information on my website, which I can also link later, about about some blogs that I've created about ways that you can maybe help reduce the amount of plastics in your life, and about different ways, and about the dangers of microplastic pollution, and the reason why we really need to talk to as many people as possible and spread the word to as many people as we can.
Okay, we got a question a little while ago from someone asking, let me see if I can pull it up right now, about some of the engagements that you've had, like the things that places where you've spoken at. So can you give some examples as to some of the interesting things you've done, the travels and interesting things that interesting places you've been able to speak?
Yeah, of course. I've been to a lot of different places. I've been to places not only around the US, but also around the world. Like I've been to the World Skills Conference in Russia, as well as the Innovation Week in the Czech Republic. I've also been to the Lead Like a Girl conference in the US and a bunch of different places. I've spoken to schools and students in Belgium, in Vietnam, in China, and a bunch of places. So yeah, I've been speaking, especially now that the pandemic started, I've been speaking with really a lot of people who have messaged me, or schools that have Zoomed with me, things like that. And yeah, Barnes just sent the link to my website in the chat, so you can check that out.
I noticed there was a question from Pay just a short while ago. If she could just say it. You can all feel free, by the way. We don't have to necessarily do this where in an orderly fashion where you all send in questions. If you want to, you're more than welcome to just go ahead and ask Anna questions. Unmute and go ahead and ask her yourselves if you want to.
Okay, I see the question. How did I choose my science fair topic and why? So I chose my science fair topic because working on something related to the ocean is very important to me. I grew up in Boston and I've always been surrounded by beaches. I've always gone there every weekend. And so when I learned about plastic pollution, that was really something that I wanted to focus on. And so as I explained earlier with like the question about why did I decide to focus on microplastics, that's kind of that's kind of like the path that I took that really started me out on this journey. And my science fair topic has changed throughout the years as I've learned more about like artificial intelligence. Like you saw how I started out with this ROV over here, and eventually I was able to make my way to creating a simulation model of finding where the microplastics are located. And so it's really based on like the things that I've learned along the way and ways that I want to make improvements to my project. Someone said, what are my plans for the future? Sam said, what are my plans for the future? So my plans are actually to work on ways that maybe I can reuse plastics in different ways. So once we have the plastics that are collected from the ocean floor, obviously they're going to be very dirty. They're probably going to be covered in marine detritus and all sorts of pollutants. And so we don't really want to use, so those plastics would be very difficult to recycle. So instead there's a process known as pyrolysis, where you can take these plastics and you can actually turn them into a form of renewable energy. And that's one avenue that I'm looking to explore more.
We have another question about some of the scientists that you've spoken with. So maybe someone has looked at your Smithsonian article and saw the Woods Hole reference and the Huffington Post one, the articles.
Wow.
So it would be interesting to hear about the scientists, the professional scientists you've spoken with and validated your research with.
Yeah, I've spoken with a lot of different people. For example, like what you said, I've been speaking with a few scientists from Woods Hole that have seen my ROV and that have talked with me a little bit about it. I've been speaking with people like Dr. Carol Lavender Law and Casey Machado, and I've also spoken with a lot of people who do some things related to optics. Like I've been speaking with companies at Bruker, as well as places like that. And so I really just reached out to a lot of different places. I've also spoken with people at aquariums such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. I've talked to Dr. Calvin Hatton from there. And I've actually learned a lot about cool different microplastic projects that people have been working on from all around the world. That's actually how I met, I actually met the person who was in charge of the International Pellet Watch as well. I see Maiden has a question. Their hand is raised. Go ahead and just shout it out.
So how did you originally figure out how to like make your robot and what to use for it and stuff?
So that's actually pretty cool. What I decided, the original things that I used to make my robot, you can see it's made out of PVC pipes. So when I first started working on my project, my house had recently been renovated. So of course there was a lot of these PVC pipes that were just laying around my house. They weren't doing anything. So I decided to just use that for my project. And I just used like my sort of basic knowledge of engineering and just like putting things together. I made the most basic shape I thought I could think of that would still probably be useful, which was the cube. And the cube kind of evolved along the way, but the ROV made out of PVC pipes is still there. Cyan asked, did people help me build my robot? I would say a lot of people helped with maybe like contributing to my knowledge about what I should use my ROV to do. I primarily built the ROV by myself, but I definitely learned from a lot of those experts that I was talking about, as well as a little bit of YouTube videos about like how to solder and things like that. So a lot of this was through random information that I collected from a lot of different places that I was able to use in order to create my ROV. Does my robot affect marine life in any way? When I first designed my robot, and thank you so much, Penn, for that question. That's a really great question. So when I designed my ROV, I was very careful to try and come up with ways to prevent it from affecting marine life too much, because obviously I wanted to do something that would help save the world, not something that might accidentally damage it. So that's why I really took some precautions to make sure that if it found some fish, to just leave it alone. And also when I was deploying my RV, I would make sure to not put it in a place where there might be a lot of things tangled up in it. There might be places where it might accidentally injure some marine life, things like that. And there's actually a camera on it, which I would use to try and look for, like, if there's a fish right in front of me, I try to back away from it a little bit, things like that. I see that somebody asked a question about my YouTube channel. So for my YouTube channel, essentially what I have on there is a lot of information about plastic pollution in different places. For example, when I was painting my room over the summer, I was talking about ways that I could maybe prevent the paint chips from affecting the world some more, and also ways that you can maybe prevent air pollution from using specific types of paints and things like that. I have a lot of just different random information on my YouTube channel, and I see that Barnes linked it over there. Yeah.
Yeah, because we actually got a related DM question about how noticing this, how is infrared related to being able to find plastics, which I'm aware just by clicking on your YouTube channel, you have a video about your infrared work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can definitely use my YouTube channel to check out a bunch of cool stuff like that.
And so the question was, how does infrared relate to plastics?
Mm-hmm. So infrared relates to plastics. I used infrared on my ROV in the camera section, and it relates to plastics because different types of materials will absorb and reflect different types of lights differently. And so I use infrared because the infrared light is the best at identifying microplastics and specific types of plastics. And so I was able to use that to distinguish between something that might be a random piece of plastic versus a fish. Because when you just use your eyes to see it, and there's something that's bright orange, say in the middle of the ocean, you wouldn't know if that's maybe something like a traffic cone, a piece of plastic from that, or if it's a clownfish. But using infrared, because obviously a fish would probably absorb and reflect light differently from a traffic cone, is able to distinguish the difference between that.
Great. And we had another question about AI. What kind of AI platform did you use?
So the AI platform that I used was TensorFlow. So it was created by Google, and it's an open source platform that really anybody can learn to use. And it was really nice because I was able to see, I think I showed it in my PPT, but I was able to see like the percentage of accuracy that my AI thought that it was in terms of identifying the microplastics. And so I was able to train that with a lot of different photos that I was able to create myself. So when training artificial intelligence, I needed to create a lot of different photos. And so I was able to use data augmentation in order to create a lot of different versions of microplastics on different kinds of backgrounds. And so that was one of the photos that you saw in my PPT earlier that it was using to identify the microplastics.
Maybe you can explain data augmentation, since I'm not sure everybody got that.
Yeah, sure. So For what I need, so when you're training artificial intelligence, you need a lot of photos. When I was training my system, I needed tens of thousands of photos in order to train it accurately. And it would be obviously very difficult to manually take tens of thousands of photos of these microplastics. So what I did instead was I got a few different photos of different sand backgrounds and different lightings, and I got a few different microplastics of different shapes and colors and sizes. And I was able to take those microplastics and I was able to paste them on the sand background in different types of orientations and angles. And I did that tens of thousands of different times using a program that I created. I didn't do it myself, but I was able to use that in order to train my system.
Great. And another question, a follow-up question from the same source was, so what should other students be doing with artificial intelligence these days with their science fair projects? Or why should they consider AI for their science projects?
I think that the thing about artificial intelligence is that as it's getting better and better, a lot of different industries are starting to use it. Like I've seen so many projects about people, for example, like in medical industries who are working on maybe identifying different types of cancers with artificial intelligence. There's what I've done with identifying where microplastics are located. And there's just so much that you can do with artificial intelligence in so many different places. And I think that's why it's so important to use it. And it's artificial intelligence is quickly becoming better than even us, than even humans at identifying things and predicting things, which is why I think that it's very important to really start using that a bit more, and why I think that it's by using artificial intelligence in a science fair project would be a really good idea.
Great. Well, that's all the direct message questions that I've gotten from folks. So I'm just going to open it up to the floor here. And if there's any final questions for Anna, I know she is this year at the Mass State Science Fair, we've already started to release all the what we call safety review committee checks. So we're already asking students this early in the year to start submitting their project ideas. So I know Anna has another project she's working on this year that she has to get to. So I don't want to take all of Anna's evening away, but I'm hoping that we can address everybody's questions. So if there's any final questions, please go ahead and shoot them in the chat, or just feel free to ask them out loud. And if not, then I will just say one final message about Anna's book. Anna's book, unfortunately, came out right before COVID, and we had a big launch planned, and we had the local bookstore and a lot of places were prepared to help Anna promote everything, and unfortunately, everything shut down right as she was getting ready to put the book out there to the world. So this is actually her relaunch. That's what this counts as a relaunch of her book, which came out previously. So we're offering a promotion, of course. So I'm going to put that in the chat. We're doing 25% off, and this is the discount code that I put out there for everybody, MM25. So if you know anybody who's interested in microplastics, please feel free to pass on this coupon. I'm going to type in the word coupon code here so you can make sure you find it. Coupon code is MM25. And for a limited time, we do have some of Anna's signed books that we'll be giving away. If for those of you who are on today, just know that if we get any orders in the next couple of days, we're going to be sending out Anna's signed books. So thank you very much, Anna. This was an awesome show. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. And again, if you all go through, before I close it down, I know we put the Anna's YouTube channel on there, where if you want to, or the other way to do it is to search on YouTube for Microplastics Girl, because you're probably just going to find Anna. I think she's the only one out there right now. And the Deep Plastics Initiative. So if you go ahead and check out her website, you'll find lots more video content, lots more cool things, stuff you can do at home, stuff you can do for those of you who are teachers, things you can do in your classroom with students that are safe to do, like building robots and melting plastics in a a safe toaster oven that's not what you use for your primary cooking oven, because that's probably not a good idea, melting plastics in your actual oven. But there's lots of other cool information on there. I hope you get a chance to check it out. We do have some of Anna's educational videos on our channel as well, on the YouTube channel for Tumble Home. So please check that out. And thank you everybody for signing up for today's Tumbleocity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming.
It's great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
You did good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. It's great.